After a bunch of changes in Season 9, we've come to a point where pretty much every tank is playable. Even without the 10-second overdrive, Mauga's not bad. Just like Roadhog, he's actually especially good into a lot of tank matchups. But we're not yet at a point where every tank is playable into every tank. Hard counters are still very much a thing, and most tanks have at least one. Let's get into one hard counter for every tank in Season 9. Today's Overwatch video is made possible because of Raid. And before you go judging me, make sure to actually try it. It's a turn-based fighting game with over 800 heroes. And the big kicker is, you'll get $100 in rewards with the GameLeap link in the description. It's completely free and it works on PC and all mobile devices. You can go ahead and click the link right now to claim your $100 in rewards. It helps us keep going and it's a fun casual game. Sign up to give it a try right now. First up is D.Va. She's one of the hardest tanks to counter in the first place because she's so well-rounded, especially defensively. She has 375 armor and 3 seconds of defense matrix and a 3.5 second flight cooldown. Normally Zarya would be first up as the beam tank who can shoot through matrix, but not only is she the boring, obvious option, she's also less consistent. D.Va can't block Zarya's laser, but she can avoid giving her charge, so I'm looking for a DPS answer instead, and Mei sticks out. She's got the primary fire beam damage that sprays right through matrix, so that's still covered. She also just got an ammo and ice block regen buff. Although the buffs aren't too strong, they both help out with the D.Va duel. More ammo to melt D.Va with, and more health to tank D.Va's damage for longer. In order to counter D.Va, you've got to be able to play within her effective range, otherwise she'll just force you out with burst damage. Mei is tanky enough to survive for at least 15 seconds against D.Va, so she's definitely covered, and while she's between ice blocks, that spray damage adds up fast. Compared to other beam heroes, Symmetra may do more damage, but she can't stick around as long. 300 health goes a long way, especially when you can fully heal all of it in just 5 seconds. And to make the matchup even more hurtful, Mei especially hard counters D.Va's self-destruct. If you're forced to leave your mech next to a Mei, you're pretty much done for. Ice Wall blocks the damage for her team, and Ice Block blocks it for herself. So she can clean up with an icicle headshot right after the bomb goes off almost every time. Up next is Doomfist. He's a lot more counterable than D.Va, which makes for an easier answer, Sombra. In order to really fully counter Doomfist, you have to be able to stop his movement, and that's kind of Sombra's whole thing, silencing heroes on a 6-second cooldown. And after a lot of time cooking in Overwatch 2, her damage output has gotten pretty good. Her SMG is consistent and her current form of virus is devastating, especially to the tanks with the least health, like Doomfist at 525. Unless he's next to his whole team, getting hacked at all is bound to force him back super far. Avoiding the hack isn't easy either. It's been hard for everyone ever since Sombra got the ability to start her hack while invisible. There are also a few other things that make Doom's life even harder, and they're specific to him only too. Firstly, the virus damage over time isn't affected by power block. That means it'll deal a full 100 damage to him without charging up his empowered punch. Block is also pretty much unusable into Sombra. It's an easy hack. Even better, Doomfist players will be forced to end their block early to try to save themselves, drastically reducing the time they can spend in the fight. And finally, although Sombra can't escape as well as before, her Translocator still can't be cancelled. Throwing it out has no cast time, so as long as you throw it out before getting punched, you can't get stunned out of it. You'll just teleport away after the 0.25 seconds. Now for Jungle Queen. She has an easier time into a lot of the DPS because of her smaller hitbox, so countering her takes a good tank matchup. And although it's close between Sigma, Orisa, and Ram, Orisa fits the hard counter title best. She has a lot of advantages. Having both the spear and spin to stop Queen from ever getting too close is probably the biggest. Her range damage is also way more effective than before, thanks to Season 9's bigger projectiles and no fall off from earlier. The only thing Queen can do against Orisa is focus her, but with Orisa's 350 armor, it's gonna take a lot of shots. Still, if Queen jiggle peeks and focuses your head, she can get the advantage in the duel, but all you have to do as Orisa is just chill and play safe. Behind cover, you'll be healed up and your weapon heat will go down, making you even harder to approach, or on the attack, harder to slow down. Like I mentioned earlier, Spear and Spin easily stop Queen from advancing, whether she's going for a slash or her ultimate. Having two abilities that stop Queen from ulting anyone but you is really good, and Orisa can handle the anti-heal with her Fortify easily. Now for the recently nerfed Mauga. Even in his weaker state, he still doesn't get hard countered easily. The closest it gets is actually Orisa again. Mauga's close range damage is so overwhelming that no tank can beat him up close, and his mid-range damage is decent enough that the DPS that can don't get near enough to do it. Orisa comes closest by basically never allowing Mauga into his effective range. Spin and Spear do it just as well to him as they do to Queen, but not a single hero in this game can kill Mauga during cardiac overdrive. It takes a group effort at least, but usually it's best to play safe, let the duration run its course, and then punish. Orisa has enough momentum with Spin that she can quickly re-enter the fight, but once that cardiac overdrive is over, Orisa has an overwhelming advantage. And at range, Orisa can win the spam duel by jiggle peeking with projectiles, which also makes it hard for Mauga to consistently crit her. The only way for Orisa to lose into Mauga is by either respecting his range too much and playing too far away, or by trying to force the Mauga kill with your damage and spear. Both Mauga and Orisa take a ton of damage from DPS, but Orisa is harder to force out of the fight. Sometimes the hard counter is just letting the Mauga run into your whole team's damage while keeping your own armor healthy for the counter push afterwards. It's one of the less interesting hard counter matchups since we're not brute forcing Mauga out of the game, but it definitely works. As long as you don't die during Mauga's overdrive engage, your team can take all the space afterwards. Okay, so Orisa hard counters at least 2 tanks. Now for the tank that counters her. Luckily, there is a way to stop her, Zarya. She's always been good at forcing Orisa's abilities and really smelting her in close range. The only way to lose as Zarya is by getting overwhelmed by a Lucio Orisa push. As long as you play safer and longer range against that matchup, there's not a lot the average Orisa can do. Orisa's range spam has gotten better, and because of her heat mechanic, it's easy to bait Zarya bubbles and not feed them, but the same doesn't go for the rest of her team. Zarya's energy gain has gotten better in Season 9 for the same reason it improved when she had a 15% bigger bubble. She absorbs more stray spam. With high energy, the Orisa matchup is really easy. Although she can outrange your beam, she can't outrange your grenades. Orisa usually wants to play slow and spammy, but Zarya plays slow even better. Moving on to her mantra, he's more well-rounded than most. Having both heavy damage reduction and a shield makes him a lot more flexible, but the long cooldown of the shield makes him an easy target for mauga. With more armor and more consistent damage, it's easy to force the shield with just focus fire. That's the only hard part about the matchup. Against mauga, Ram can't do anything without shield. Mauga easily wins the brawl against Nemesis form, even if you can't kill Ram during it. Cardiac Overdrive for his whole team is a lot more useful than having a slowly dying tank that can't do damage. And Mauga doesn't need to hard focus the Ram and be in his face all the time either. With 25 meters before fall off, he can force Ram to block from anywhere on the map. It works for his ultimate too. When you can't do anything in Nemesis form anyway, 30 more DPS and a longer duration won't do much. Ram also doesn't have the abilities to stop an overdrive boosted team from running on him. Mauga is both the brawlier hero and the one with the better range. He may not be as good as Ram is into other matchups, but he's your tank if you want to counter Ram without just going Orisa again. Next up is Reinhardt. Here's a hero with a ton of counters, but the hero he can't do anything against has got to be Zenyatta. Brawl and spam comps have their own ways to win, but the pure Zen versus Rein matchup is a no-brainer. Fire Strike didn't get any bigger, so dodging it is the same as before, and swings aren't a problem when your melee keeps him from getting too close. Zen isn't just hard to kill for Rein, but Discord totally negates all the good armor he has. Just the threat of Discord alone forces the Rein to hold more shield, which gives you more time to burn it. It's a simple but effective matchup. Even in the ultimate fights, Transcendence beats Shatter, both for healing up the follow-up damage and for body blocking the charge. Next we've got Roadhog, and big surprise, Orisa counters him too, but not as hard as Mauga does, picking up his second hard counter so far. Roadhog just can't avoid getting ignited. He has to peek to look for hooks, but anytime he does, he just feeds Mauga more health and more crits. Overdrive's range is also good enough that Mauga can reactively save teammates who get hooked in. Mauga himself is pretty easy to hook, but the question is if you even want to do it. If you don't have a well to hook him into, anybody else is a better target. Roadhog isn't that good, but Whole Hog does help him with a lot of tank matchups, and it's actually one of the only ways to survive or break the cage fight. It usually shreds tanks, but Mauga's pretty much the one exception. His double chain gun damage is the only thing that can compete with Whole Hog's insane burst, and with all of Mauga's lifesteal effects, it's actually Roadhog on the timer, not Mauga. Hog also doesn't need to be countered by stuns anymore. The new breather on a resource makes it harder to collapse on him. It's better to play the slow, controlled spam game, never allowing Roadhog to look for a hook without getting focused. Moving on to Sigma, there's a few tank options that work, like Winston and Zarya, but Sigma's shield helps a lot to even the playing field against them. Instead, Echo takes the hard counter spot. It's cool that Winston shoots through both shield and grasp, but breaking the shield is pretty important to keep Sigma Force out of the fight for everyone else. Echo's got enough damage for it, and also the focusing beam to finish. The flight advantage is also really big, and it's more than just being harder to hit. Being above Sigma forces him to look up to duel you, and because he also shields and grasps in front of him, he can't block both you and your team at the same time. Not every good Sig map is equally good for Echo, but as an otherwise strong and popular pick, it's not too hard to make it work. At the end of the day, Echo forces Sigma's abilities really well, and that's what matters. You don't even need to change your playstyle, it's just good old focus the tank gameplay. On to the final three, starting with Winston. Usually people go with Reaper, Roadhog, or Mauga for a more updated take, but the biggest consistent problem for Winston is Cassidy, who can both shred bubble at close range and poke out his armor from afar. Close range shotgun guys are annoying for sure, but they're also easily rotated around. A good cast with Season 9 bullets can melt Winston at any range. He has an especially big head hitbox that's wide open for spamming headshots at. Cass also doesn't fall over instantly when he gets bubble dived. Combat rolls 75% damage reduction means Cass can dip out of bubble without getting bursted too bad. The funny thing about the ult matchup is that Deadeye is pretty mediocre in most situations, but not against Primal. The best thing a good Winston can do is bait it, and a bad Winston will just die or lose almost all his health and space. Even without the ultimate to match, Cass's grenade is enough to completely stop the momentum of Primal. You've just got to time it before he jumps and not after to get the most disruption. The next tank on the list is Wrecking Ball. Every counter he has is a hard counter, and I've already named a few of his worst enemies so far, like Sombra, Orisa, and Cassidy. Targeting his movement is clearly a popular choice to shut Ball out of the game, and my hard counter choice for Ball that isn't Sombra does it too. Junker Queen. She easily counters Ball with just a knife. The shout to help your team survive a slam engage is a bonus. Queen's also especially lethal into DPS, where Orisa is more of a tank buster that can duel DPS. The Ball matchup isn't only how much you can hard focus him, you also have to be able to punish the rest of his team for not having a front line. Queen also has a team buff. Orisa can only protect herself, which makes her a lot worse when Ball does set up a really good engage, with his team swarming from different angles. It just can't be overstated how good Knife is into Ball. He struggles to engage and escape because of it. Now for our final tank, Zarya. Despite everything, Winston still has the best counter. Zarya is not the most durable tank. Any brawl comp with Lucio can run over her even through 2 bubbles and get the kill, but comps that focus on killing the tank are easily countered. Winston is a safer matchup. His bubble is better than Zarya's both bubbles at once, and she has to waste a lot of her ammo to break it. And in the neutral fight, she gets a lot less energy from Winston compared to every other frontline tank, but he still builds Primal at the same rate. For a quick ultimate check, Zarya's grab is strong too, but the 3.5 second duration leaves a short window for follow-up if you save your Winston bubble for it. His bubble and mobility are just really hard for Zarya to deal with. Winston can also force a brawl fight thanks to his bubble. Blocking her heals with his shield after she uses one of her bubbles can be a surprisingly free kill. And the final best counter for Season 9 is signing up for Raid with R-Link. You get $100 in free rewards, so go ahead and try it out now.